Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest with Amanda.ie. I am joined today by fellow North Belfast woman Clare Curran. Clare is a solicitor and the director of Curran Bowles, a company specialising in family law. So, we're going to be talking about Clare's journey through law, what's been happening during the pandemic, some of the themes that have emerged from that, and more. So, we'll start at the beginning. Clare, how did you get into law? What made you decide you wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, so I first got into it after having done a little bit of work experience with a cousin of mine when I was still at school. So he brought me along for a week in a court case that he was dealing with back in the early 90s. And was just kind of fascinated, thought it was all very exciting and exhilarating being in the courtroom and all of the drama that entails. So I decided after school to go to Queen's to study law, did that for 3 years, and then went straight on to the Institute, which is where you get your professional qualification, and graduated from there in 2001 and really just started working straight away at the age of 21 as a solicitor. So I've been doing it my entire career and have loved it, and really went into family law at a very early stage. So I've just ended up there by default, but I think actually it suits me very well, and I really love the area of work that I do now. So yeah,
And
that's how I started.
you just recently started up your own company. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so we have launched, along with another solicitor friend of mine, Peter Bowles, we have launched a specialist family law company, Curran Bowles Family Law. So essentially decided to do that just because there was a huge demand over the course of the pandemic for people needing specialist family law advice. And because it's the area in which I've practiced for 22 years, just really thought, if I were in the position that I needed family law advice, what would I want? And it's to know that I'm dealing with someone who, specializes in that area and kind of knows it. So I just really felt that there was a need out there to provide a kind of specialist practice. And so that's what we've decided to do.
And what exactly is family law? What areas does it cover?
So it covers a kind of multitude of areas. So I would deal primarily with people going through relationship breakdowns. So whether that's divorce or dissolution of civil partnerships, or couples who aren't married, who maybe own property together. So I would deal with all kind of aspects of relationship breakdown, primarily helping people resolve their finances. So, home ownership, property ownership, businesses, pensions, incomes, helping them sort all of that out, and really taking them through the legal process of then dissolving their marriage or civil partnership. And then I also advise in other areas that are related to that, such as, if there's custody issues that arise between parents over, where a child should live or how much time they should spend with their other parent, or if disputes arise about things like what schools they should go to or what religion they should be brought up as, all those sorts of issues we would tend to advise on. And then there are other kind of offshoots as well, such as, domestic violence issues. If people are experiencing abusive relationships, we would give advice about what to do in that sort of situation. And then other more specialized areas like international family law, international child abduction, those sorts of areas are growing just with people moving around the world more openly now. You tend to find that, children can have parents from two different countries, and custody issues arise in those sorts of situations. So we would advise in all those types of areas, all areas of family law.
And you said there that you focused in on family law quite early in your career. Was there anything particular that drew you to that area of law?
So I ended up, just moving into the family law department in the firm where I was an apprentice. When I was still an apprentice, there was a need for assistance in the family law department. So I started there really at the age of 21, and just loved the kind of nature of the work. I kind of see myself as a people person, like to think that I'm an empathetic person, and I'm just sort of fascinated by people and their lives. And really, as a family lawyer, you have to get into such private issues with people and really get to know them and understand why they're in the position they are, because that then informs what might happen in their case. So it's a kind of practice area that really suits me as a person, as opposed to maybe the more staid, contractual disputes. That's not my bag so much. But so yeah, I got into it almost by accident, but it suits me well, and I've loved it ever since. So I've never wanted to kind of practice in any other area.
And obviously lawyers have had a variety of experiences during the pandemic. I'm taking it as a family lawyer that you've been flat out the whole way through the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really interesting time for, well, everyone, I'm sure, but for family lawyers, yes, it's been different. Everything has changed almost overnight. It changed last year, how we practice, how we consult with people, how we go to court. All of that just really changed overnight. But in family law, we were lucky insofar as really it was a practice area that was prioritised by the court service and the court system in terms of making sure that people going through family crises were able to access the courts fairly quickly after the pandemic started. So there was an initial, everything stopped for a number of weeks, and that was alarming for everyone involved. You have hearings listed, cases that needed to be resolved, and everything stopped. But pretty quickly, within a matter of weeks, things got up and running again remotely, and so that's how we access the court. In the vast majority of our cases now, we're operating, going into court remotely through our laptops, on-site links. That has started to change a little bit now, and the courts are now opening up for people who require to be physically present, because it's not a perfect system by any means. Having to dial in remotely to court isn't an ideal scenario for many situations, but for the more standard cases or uncontested situations, where you have a straightforward divorce where everybody wants the same outcome that isn't being contested, that can be done relatively well over the site link system. But in a more difficult contested case, if you have a dispute over, children being removed into care, or, adoption type cases, it's not an ideal system, and people really need to be in the room with their lawyers and able to get that advice in a more immediate way. So we were fortunate that the family law system kind of fairly quickly moved and transitioned to be able to sort of facilitate all of that. But yeah, it's been a big change for everyone. We tend to now do our meetings remotely. We tend to take initial instructions over Zoom consultations, so you're not having that kind of face-to-face interaction with people, and you maybe do lose a little bit of the kind of humanity of the situation through that. But we are open to having people coming into the office now with all the safeguards that we have in place. So it's just it's an ever-changing thing. We're developing and we're rolling with what we're allowed to do, and what the kind of health situation allows us to be sensible about doing. So yeah, it's been a big
Claire, what themes have you noticed then during the pandemic? Because there's a lot of sort of reports in the work that I'm doing about an increase in divorce and so on. Is that something that you're noticing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, most family lawyers will tell you that they've never been busier. We joke as family lawyers that January is always our busiest month of every year, because post-Christmas, people spending a lot of time together, holiday periods, people decide after that.
New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, New Year's resolutions. January is always our busiest month. We always see a spike in initial inquiries because people have had that intense period of time together, or yes, are making big changes because it's a new year. But really, the last year has been like January every month. It's people have had that intense periods of time at home. They're not necessarily getting the reprieve or the routine of going out to work. They've had the pressure of having their children at home. They've had the pressure of being on furlough. Finances are tight. So all of that has been like a boiling pot, I think, for many people, and shone a bit of a light, maybe on relationships that were beginning to creak. It's shone a bit of a light, and people are picking up the phone and getting that family law advice and saying, I can't put up with this situation. We need advice. We need to be able to move on with our lives. the other really kind of worrying impact has been the increase in domestic violence.
And child protection must have been an issue through the pandemic for you to deal with those kind of sensitive cases as well.
Yeah. I mean, those are obviously really difficult cases, you know, cases where maybe social services are intervening to take children, remove children into care if they're experiencing abuse or neglect. And again, there has been an upturn in that sort of a case. You know, there's an awful lot of cases that are coming before the courts involving those sorts of issues. But also there's a bit of a worry about the fact that maybe there's children in situations that aren't coming to the attention of the courts because they aren't under, you know, the usual watchful eye of teachers in schools, or social workers haven't been able to kind of have their usual hands-on role in going out and visiting families. So there is a concern about, you know, what's underneath, what isn't being seen, what are children experiencing that maybe would have been reported in the past but hasn't come to the attention of the courts. And that's something that is pretty unsettling when you think about the last year.
And in terms of the law and your sort of assessment of the career you've chosen, like if you could wave a magic wand or you could make life better in the legal world, is there anything in particular you would drill down on or focus in on to make better?
Well, I suppose that the most difficult aspect of working in family law is just access for justice for families who maybe don't have big incomes, you know, those who aren't necessarily eligible for legal aid, because legal aid has changed massively over the last 10 years or so. It's really, there have been huge cutbacks in family law legal aid applications, so it's really not open to people on fairly low incomes who feel that they can't access lawyers for issues that really do need to be resolved. So that would be one area, I suppose, that has been difficult as a family lawyer to continue to operate in, because you know, people aren't getting that access to legal aid, and the fees are just they're not good for family lawyers. So many people who do it for the love of the job, as opposed to making pots and pots of money, which might come as a surprise to some people. So yeah, that is one aspect that's difficult. And you know, the system itself can be slow. It can be frustrating for people to go through. So, but that's how you go about changing that probably takes a massive turnaround, you know. So the one issue that I think really requires to be looked at is the legal aid issue.
In the work that you're doing, there's quite a lot of sort of myths and misunderstanding, particularly whenever it comes down to the divorce side of things. I think the armchair lawyers can be a bit of an issue for you. Is that something that you find?
Well, people, you know, people love to give advice to their friends or family if they've been through a marriage breakdown themselves or a divorce themselves. They think that what has happened in their situation is going to apply to their friends. So you do get a lot of misinformation floating around in the world of family law. You know, people who come through the door and say, "Oh, this happened to my brother, so I know this is going to happen to me." But it's so individual. It's, you know, the legislation that governs what happens on a financial application on divorce, for example, is so wide, and there's such a huge discretion that, you know, you really need a specialist lawyer telling you and going through in detail your own particular circumstances to be able to advise what the likely outcome is going to be in your case, because what happened to your mate isn't necessarily going to be what happens to you. And there are a number of kind of myths out there that, you know, people come through the door and say, "Oh, you know, my husband cheated on me, so does that mean I'm going to get everything in the divorce?" And you have to kind of disabuse people of those notions, because that doesn't really have an impact. In many cases, you know, who was at fault doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up worse off financially. Or the other kind of common myth that I would come across is people think that you know, there's such a notion as kind of common law marriage, where people who have cohabited for a prolonged period of time think that they're in a sort of pseudo marriage situation, and that will apply to, you know, sorting out maybe the property issues when their relationship breaks down. So yeah, talking people through those sorts of myths that maybe perpetuate over time for whatever reason, you just realize that there are a lot of misconceptions about what happens in a relationship breakdown. And that's why I would always urge people to get specialist family law advice before deciding what to do, so that you're making your plan about going forward based on accurate information and not misinformation.
Yeah, that's a very important point. It's something that comes up a lot. The misinformation issue is something that's affecting all spheres at the moment. And I think with the boom of online, that it's just, a lie can spread around the world in seconds. And that's
and that makes it so. Yes, it makes it true. Yeah, that is the problem. Fake news. Fake news happens in family law time.
And there's been great news this week about the appointment of Siobhan Keegan, the First Lady Justice. I just wanted to touch on the issue of women in law. Like, I was reading Siobhan Keegan's resume the other day. Like, what an impressive woman to have.
It's all to shame, I'm sure.
Yeah, at the top of the legal system, that, a history maker, the first woman to hold that role. That must be inspiring for you.
Incredible. It's incredible. It's very exciting, particularly as a family lawyer. She worked very much in family law and has a great affinity with the family law circuit. And I've worked with her in cases myself, so it's brilliant to be in any small way associated with her. But even just for the young female lawyers coming through, I texted a kind of younger apprentice solicitor who I worked with to say, turn on, watch this. This is history in the making. This is really, really exciting. You need to be part of this. So, it spreads a little bit of excitement, and just the kind of potential, that anyone coming into any field, any area of work can reach that at the highest of echelons is just, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and such a positive thing to see. And it was lovely to hear her speak about being a woman and working in family law, and just sending the message that with, I think she said, hard work and resilience and a bit of self-belief, you can achieve anything. And everybody needs to get that message. You just need to believe in yourself and feel like you are just as well placed to get to the top as anybody else, no matter what your background or your circumstances or who you are.
That's great. And just to finally, just to touch on the best thing for you about the work that you do, what is the biggest privilege, or what do you enjoy most or get most satisfaction out in the course of the work that you do?
I think just helping people through what is, one of the most difficult experiences that anyone can go through. That's really my desire in every case that I do, and every person that walks through the door is, I really just like to try and think of them as, if they were my brother or my cousin or my auntie, what would I want for them in their case, and to really just try and bring them through the process in an empathetic and kind of clear-cut way. I think an awful lot of people are intimidated by the legal process or intimidated by lawyers themselves. So really just kind of taking away all of that and helping people feel supported through the most difficult period of their lives. That is ultimately a satisfying thing to do.
Claire, thank you very much for joining me today. If people wanted to find out more about the work, where do they find you online?
So we have a website, Curran Bowles Family Law. So if people want to look up that website, they should be able to get in touch with me through that.
That's brilliant. Claire, thank you very much for joining me today.
Okay, thanks a million, Amanda.